I don't even know where to start with this, but I guess I have to begin somewhere. My name is Jake, and I was married to a woman named Kelly for 5 years. We were that couple everyone envied, at least that's what I thought. We lived in a cozy little house in the suburbs, had decent jobs, and a dog named Max who had a penchant for stealing socks. It all seemed picture perfect until it was. In hindsight, there were small signs. Kelly started working late more often, claiming it was because of a big project at work. I didn't think much of it at first. She was in marketing, and I assumed the extra hours came with the territory. But she also became distant. We used to have long chats over dinner, but those turned into awkward silences filled with her scrolling through her phone. I brushed it off as stress from work. It's amazing how blind love can make you. Then came the day that changed everything. I came home early, wanting to surprise her with a nice dinner. I had a whole meal prepped and ready to go. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed a car parked next to ours. It was our neighbor's son, Ryan. He was a few years younger than us and had always been a bit too friendly with Kelly. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I mean, he was just a kid, right? But as I walked into the house, I heard voices coming from the living room. I froze, my heart racing as I recognized Kelly's laugh. I felt something shift inside me, like a cold wave washing over my body. I tiptoed towards the living room, peeking around the corner. My jaw almost dropped when I saw them, Kelly and Ryan, sitting way too close together on the couch, sharing a bottle of wine and looking way too cozy. What happened next was a blur. I stormed into the room, and the look on her face was priceless, like a deer caught in headlights. The air was thick with tension as I demanded to know what the hell was going on. Kelly floundered for words, and Ryan, bless his clueless heart, just sat there like he had no idea how to react. "Jake, it's not what it looks like," Kelly exclaimed. Her voice was shaky, and I could see a hint of panic in her eyes. That's when I knew I was right. The tears that spilled from her eyes felt more like a performance than genuine regret. "Really? Because it looks like you're about to make a terrible decision," I shot back, anger and betrayal coursing through my veins. I demanded answers, and the excuses poured out like a leaky faucet. She claimed Ryan was just helping her with work, that they were discussing a marketing strategy, and that it was all innocent. But I saw through her lies. The way she was trying to spin this was infuriating. I couldn't believe I was hearing this from the woman I had trusted with everything. I felt my heart shatter into a million pieces. My mind raced with anger, disbelief, and a hollowness that threatened to consume me. I thought love was supposed to protect you from things like this. I guess I was wrong. All the times I stood by her, all those moments I thought we shared, was it all a lie? The betrayal hit me harder than I anticipated, and I felt sick to my stomach. After Ryan awkwardly excused himself and slunk out of the house, I was left alone with Kelly, who was still trying to explain herself. The conversation spiraled into a blend of accusations and defenses. I yelled. She cried. It felt like we were both trapped in a twisted drama that neither of us wanted to be a part of. In that moment, I realized I had to make a choice. My heart was torn between wanting to salvage what we had and the overwhelming urge to shove her lies back in her face. I finally decided to take a step back and think about what I truly wanted. I needed a plan. I needed to figure out how to confront this betrayal. So I let her keep talking, while I mentally prepared myself for the storm that would follow. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. The initial confrontation with Kelly left a lot of unresolved feelings simmering beneath the surface. I was angry, heartbroken, and yet there was this strange sense of clarity growing within me. I didn't want to be a doormat, and the thought of forgiving her felt like a betrayal to myself. I needed to gather evidence. I had to know the full extent of this affair. I took a few days off work, claiming I needed to deal with some personal issues. Instead, I spent my time digging around for the truth. It was hard to focus, and each time Kelly entered the room, I had to suppress the urge to lash out. I was on a mission, and I could feel myself slipping into detective mode. I started by checking her phone. It felt like a violation, I knew that, but I needed answers. One day, while she was in the shower, I snuck into the living room where her phone sat charging on the coffee table. My heart raced as I unlocked it with the code I had memorized. Messages flooded my screen, and it took everything in me not to throw the phone against the wall. There were countless texts from Ryan, filled with flirtation, emojis that made my skin crawl, and even plans to meet up that were clearly not about marketing. I felt like I was being suffocated by this new reality. She had been lying to me, and I had been too blind to see it. I couldn't believe how naive I had been thinking. Our marriage was solid. Instead, it felt like a house of cards, ready to collapse with the slightest breath. After scrolling through their messages, I noticed that they had even exchanged pictures. I didn't want to see what was on the other side of that screen, but I couldn't help myself. I opened one of the images, and just like that, my heart plummeted to my stomach. It was a picture of Kelly in a negligee, one that I had purchased for her birthday. The realization hit me hard. She had worn it for him, not for me. The betrayal felt like a stab in the chest, sharp and unrelenting. I slammed her phone down, rage boiling over. How could she disregard our life together so easily? After that discovery, I felt even more determined to execute my plan for revenge. I began thinking about the life I wanted, a life that didn't include the betrayal and deceit that Kelly had brought into our home. I started researching what it would take to move out, to find a place where I could regain my sense of self. I didn't want a tiny apartment. No, I dreamed bigger. I wanted a mansion. A place where I could live freely, with better surroundings, better memories, and a fresh start. I had spent years saving up for a down payment on a nice house, and now it seemed like the perfect time to make that dream a reality. It was time to confront Kelly again, but this time, I would be armed with the truth and a plan. I decided to confront her about the texts, to throw it all back in her face. The moment arrived one evening when we were both home. I called her into the living room, my heart racing in anticipation. When she entered, the look of confusion on her face fueled my fire. "Sit down, Kelly. We need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She sat looking nervous, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. I pulled out my phone and displayed the messages. "Care to explain this?" I asked, watching as her face drained of color. She stammered, her excuses tumbling out like a waterfall, but I cut her off. I didn't want to hear her lies any longer. I couldn't stomach the thought of her trying to justify her betrayal. "Save it. I know everything and I've had enough," I said, my voice rising with anger. "You think you can just lie and cheat and come back like nothing happened? I deserve better than this." Her reaction was exactly what I expected: tears, pleading, and an attempt to manipulate my emotions. She promised it was a one-time thing, that she was sorry and wanted to work on our marriage. But I wasn't buying it. I had seen the truth, and the reality was too painful to ignore. I felt a strange sense of power in that moment. I was reclaiming my life. I didn't have to accept her betrayal. I could choose to walk away and start anew. I told her I was moving out and that I planned to start fresh. Her pleas fell on deaf ears as I turned and walked away, my heart pounding but my resolve stronger than ever. I had made my decision, and now I was ready to execute my plan. It was time to upgrade my life, to find a mansion where I could breathe freely and leave the shadows of betrayal behind. After that confrontation, things moved quickly. I packed up my things: clothes, personal items, memories that now felt tainted. Kelly threw a fit, begging me to reconsider, but I was resolute. I had made my choice, and I was not about to back down. I felt a rush of adrenaline coursing through me for the first time in weeks. I was finally taking control of my life, and it felt empowering. I spent the next few days looking at properties online. The thought of a mansion excited me. I wanted something that felt like a fresh start, a place where I could create new memories, far removed from the heartbreak that had taken over my life. I scoured listings, looking for something that would fit my vision of a new beginning. I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted, but I knew I didn't want to settle for anything less than extraordinary. I found a stunning property in a quieter area of town. It was a sprawling mansion with a beautiful garden and a pool that whispered promises of endless summer days. I could picture myself lounging by the water, hosting barbecues, and filling the empty rooms with laughter. I arranged for a viewing, and the moment I stepped through the grand entrance, I felt a sense of belonging. This was it, my escape from the life I had known. The decision to buy was surprisingly easy. I had been smart with my money and I found a mortgage broker willing to help me navigate the process quickly. Within a week, I was signing papers, and just like that, I was the proud owner of a mansion. Overwhelmed with excitement, I couldn't help but smile. This was my new beginning. The moving day was bittersweet. I loaded up my truck, memories flooding my mind as I glanced around the house that had been my home. It was where I had built a life with Kelly. Yet it was also the same place where trust had shattered. I pushed those thoughts aside. They didn't deserve the space in my mind anymore. I was ready to move forward. Once I settled into the mansion, I felt an exhilarating sense of liberation. The first night, I sat on the back patio, staring at the stars above, a glass of whiskey in hand. The quiet was refreshing. I could hear the faint sound of crickets chirping, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I breathed in deeply and felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was free, but Kelly wasn't done with me yet. She started showing up unannounced. At first, it was just a few texts pleading with me to talk. I ignored them. Then she started appearing on my doorstep, claiming she wanted to see how I was doing. Each time I saw her, I felt a mix of anger and pity. She didn't understand that I was serious about moving on. It was as if she thought she could charm her way back into my life. One afternoon, she knocked on my door while I was unpacking boxes. I hadn't spoken to her in days, and my stomach turned at the sight of her. She looked somewhat put together, but there was a desperation in her eyes that made it hard to ignore. "Jake, can we talk?" she asked, her tone laced with a hint of desperation. I hesitated, but eventually invited her inside. I didn't want to be rude, but I was also not thrilled at the prospect of her trying to worm her way back into my life. We settled into my new living room surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. "I miss you," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been thinking about everything that happened, and I'm so sorry. I want to make it right, I really do." I could feel the anger boiling beneath my calm exterior. Her apologies felt empty, a last-ditch effort to regain control. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "Kelly, you had your chance. You made your choice when you decided to cheat on me. What we had is gone, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise," I replied, my voice steady. She looked taken aback, her eyes narrowing with something that resembled anger. "You think you can just move on and forget everything we had? It's not that simple." I stood my ground, feeling more empowered with every word. "It is simple for me. I'm done playing games. I deserve better than what you gave me." As the conversation shifted, she tried to manipulate my feelings, reminding me of all the good times we had shared. But I wasn't falling for it. I had spent too long in that cycle of heartbreak. I knew I couldn't afford to get caught up in her web of lies again. "Are you even willing to fight for us?" she pressed, desperation creeping into her voice. I shook my head. "You've made your choices. Now I'm making mine, and they don't include you." With that, I ushered her out, closing the door firmly behind me. It felt like a weight had been lifted. I was finally standing up for myself, and it felt good. I wasn't going to let her drag me back into the darkness. But as the days passed, I realized this was just the beginning. I had escaped one battle, but I was still in the midst of a war, one that was about to escalate. The more I settled into my new home, the more I could feel the tension rising. I had to be prepared for what was to come. Kelly wasn't going to give up easily, and I was going to need a plan to protect the new life I had fought so hard to build. Days turned into weeks, and the reality of my new life began to sink in. I was embracing my independence, relishing in the freedom of not having to tiptoe around someone else's feelings. The mansion felt like a sanctuary, a place where I could finally be myself without the weight of betrayal looming over me. But despite the euphoria of my newfound freedom, I knew that there were challenges ahead. Kelly hadn't given up. If anything, her attempts to reach me became more intense. She showed up at my new home unannounced, at odd hours, and even tried to leverage our mutual friends to get in touch with me. I could see her frustration bubbling over as her attempts to manipulate the situation backfired. I felt like I was stuck in a game of cat and mouse, and every time she cornered me, I had to remind myself of why I had left her in the first place. One evening, I decided to throw a housewarming party, inviting a few friends to celebrate my new beginning. I needed to surround myself with supportive people, and I thought it might help me solidify my decision to move on. I decorated the space, put together some simple snacks, and prepared a playlist that made my heart race with excitement. As friends started to arrive, the atmosphere shifted, and I felt the jubilant energy infecting me. The night was perfect. Laughter filled the rooms as people mingled, catching up and enjoying the good vibes. It felt liberating to have my friends rally around me, supporting my new chapter. I felt proud of what I had accomplished, and the weight of the past began to feel lighter. But just when I thought I could fully enjoy the celebration, I looked up and saw Kelly standing at the entrance of my home. My stomach dropped. She had arrived uninvited, and the sight of her face darkened the joyful atmosphere in an instant. My heart raced as I saw her scanning the room. Friends were caught off guard, and I could sense the tension rise. "Jake, can we talk, please?" She called out, her voice cutting through the laughter like a knife. I felt a mix of anger and embarrassment flood through me. My friends looked at me, perplexed. I knew they could sense the unease that had suddenly invaded the party. I tried to remain calm, but inside I was fuming. "No, Kelly, you can't just barge in here. This is my private space," I snapped, asserting myself in front of my friends. She walked closer, her eyes almost pleading. "I just need to explain myself. I'm serious about wanting to make things right." "Make things right? You had your chance." I shot back, the anger spilling out. I caught the sympathetic looks from my friends, and I could see their discomfort with her presence. "This isn't the time or place." Kelly's face flushed with humiliation, but she pressed on. "But I've changed, Jake. I want to show you I can be better." "Better? How can I trust that?" "You had no problem breaking my heart before," I retorted, trying to rein in the intensity of the situation. I felt myself slipping, my resolve battling with the raw emotions that were resurfacing. My friends began to step in, sensing the tension had escalated beyond what was appropriate for the moment. "Hey, Kelly, maybe now isn't the best time. Why don't you give Jake some space?" one of them suggested gently. Kelly's expression shifted, an angry flicker crossed her face before she masked it with tears. "You don't understand, I love him," she shouted, her voice breaking. The room fell silent, everyone taken aback by her outburst. I felt a wave of guilt crash over me. I had loved her once, but that felt like a lifetime ago. All I wanted now was to move on. "I think you should leave, Kelly," I said firmly, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "This isn't the way to handle this. I need my space, and I'm trying to build a new life without the past haunting me." I watched as she deflated, the realization sinking in that I wasn't going to yield to her manipulations. With a heavy heart, she turned and walked out, the door slamming behind her. The atmosphere in the room shifted as my friends rushed in, offering support. "You did the right thing, man," one of them said, clapping me on the back. "You don't need her drama in your life." I nodded, though I could feel the weight of the encounter lingering in my chest. The party resumed, but I struggled to shake off the emotions that had surfaced. It was a stark reminder that Kelly wasn't going to let go easily, and I would need to stay vigilant in protecting my new life. As the weeks rolled on, I focused on settling in and creating the home I had always envisioned. I painted walls, arranged furniture, and transformed the mansion into a sanctuary of sorts. I even started inviting friends over more often, filling the space with laughter and warmth. But even with all the changes, Kelly's shadow loomed large. She sent me messages, sometimes sweet and apologetic, other times angry and accusatory. I never responded. I needed to cut ties completely, and I forced myself to ignore her pleas. I refused to let her back into my life. One evening, as I was unwinding in my living room, sipping a glass of wine, I heard a knock at the door. My heart dropped. I knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. It was Kelly again, and I suddenly felt that familiar mixture of anger and dread wash over me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for yet another confrontation. I was tired of the games, tired of the drama. This time I needed to lay down the law once and for all. I opened the door, ready to face whatever she had to throw at me. "Jake, can we really talk this time?" she pleaded, her tone softer, almost desperate. "You've had your chances, Kelly," I said firmly, locking eyes with her. I just want to explain everything," she continued, her voice trembling. "I want to show you how much I've changed. I'm done listening to your excuses. I need you to understand that I'm moving on and you need to respect that." Her expression shifted to one of disbelief mixed with anger. "You think you can just forget me? You think this is easy for me?" I held my ground, a sense of empowerment surging through me. "It's not about forgetting you, it's about choosing to prioritize my happiness. I won't let you turn my life into a battlefield anymore." With that, I closed the door firmly, sealing her out of my new life. I knew this was a turning point. I was no longer the man who tolerated her deceit. I was a man who had reclaimed control over his own existence. But as I settled back into my living room, I knew the battle was far from over. I had emerged stronger, but I would need to stay vigilant. Kelly wasn't going to let go without a fight, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. The days that followed felt almost surreal. I had taken a stand, and the sense of empowerment was intoxicating. I focused on my work and surrounded myself with friends who supported my new journey. My mansion was starting to feel like a real home, filled with laughter, good food, and a sense of peace that had been absent for far too long. But just as I began to feel settled, things took another unexpected turn. One evening, as I was scrolling through my phone, I received a notification that sent a chill down my spine. It was a message from Kelly. Normally, I ignored her texts, but this one felt different. It was a long message, filled with apologies and promises of change, but there was something darker lurking beneath the surface. "I know I messed up and I'm sorry, but Jake, if you don't listen to me, I don't know what I'll do," it read. My heart raced at that moment, the implications hanging heavily in the air. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was cornered, desperate, and that kind of desperation could lead to unpredictable behavior. I thought about it all night, contemplating whether I needed to take this seriously. I had been avoiding confrontation, but I realized I couldn't dismiss this kind of threat. I had no idea what she was capable of, and I couldn't risk putting myself in a vulnerable position. The next day, I decided to take action. I called a friend, someone who had been in a similar situation in the past, and asked for advice. They suggested I document everything: messages, instances of her showing up unannounced, everything. I started taking screenshots of her texts and kept a log of the times she had come to my place. It felt odd to think of it that way, but I wanted to be prepared, just in case. As the week rolled on, I noticed a shift in my behavior. I became hyper-aware of my surroundings, cautious when I left the house, and I even started locking the door behind me regularly. I hated that it had come to this, the constant tension and worry, but I knew I had to protect myself. One night while I was unwinding with a movie, I heard a loud bang outside. My heart jumped into my throat. I rushed to the window, peering outside to see what had happened. My stomach dropped when I spotted Kelly's car parked across the street. Panic shot through me as I realized that she had thrown something at my window, a rock perhaps. I didn't want to confront her. I was done playing games. Instead, I called the police. It felt extreme, but I knew I needed to take this seriously. As I waited for them to arrive, I felt the anger boiling beneath my skin. How had it come to this? I had wanted to move on, to build a life free of her drama, yet here I was, feeling trapped again. When the police arrived, I explained the situation, showing them the messages and the log I had created. They took it seriously and assured me they would speak with Kelly. I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me when they left, but it was short-lived. I knew this wasn't over. The police spoke with Kelly, and while they didn't arrest her, they warned her about harassing me. The very thought of her response made my blood run cold. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was only going to escalate her behavior. I felt like I was living in a horror movie, waiting for the next act of desperation to unfold. Sure enough, a few days later, I received another message from her, this time more frantic. "You've gone too far, Jake. You think you can just erase me from your life? You'll regret this." The threat sent a chill down my spine, and I immediately reached out to the police again. They advised me to get a restraining order, citing her increasingly erratic behavior. It felt surreal, but I knew I needed to protect myself. I spent the next few days gathering evidence and filling out paperwork. When I finally went to court, my hands were shaking as I recounted the events to the judge. The look on her face when the restraining order was granted was one I would never forget. It was a mix of anger and disbelief, and it made me realize I had finally stepped into a new realm of my life. With the restraining order in place, things started to quiet down. I still felt on edge, but at least I had some legal protection. I continued to document everything, making sure to stay vigilant. I focused on my job, started exploring hobbies, and slowly began to reclaim the joy in my life that had been stolen by Kelly's actions. But no matter how much I tried to move forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that Kelly was still lurking in the shadows, waiting for her chance to strike. I had learned the hard way that people can become desperate when they feel they are losing control. One evening, while I was out running errands, I received a phone call from one of my friends. They had seen Kelly at a bar downtown, and she was drunk and erratic. My heart sank as they recounted the scene. I knew she was spiraling, and part of me felt an odd pang of sympathy. The woman I had once loved was drowning in her choices, and I couldn't help but wonder if there was any way to pull her back from the edge. But I quickly reminded myself that I had to prioritize my well-being. There was no saving her. I had already tried that. I hung up the phone, a mixture of sadness and anger swirling inside. That night, I sat on my back patio, staring at the stars, contemplating everything that had transpired. I had fought hard to reclaim my life, and I refused to let anyone take that away from me again. I reminded myself that I was stronger now, and I could handle whatever came next. As I sipped my drink, I decided to take a moment to reflect on the lessons I had learned through this tumultuous journey. I had learned that it's important to stand up for yourself, that walking away from toxicity doesn't mean you're weak, it means you're brave. I had learned to be vigilant and to seek help when needed. I had learned that healing takes time, but it's possible to start anew, even after the darkest of betrayals. Little did I know, I was about to face one final confrontation, a culmination of everything that had happened. I could feel the storm brewing, and I had to be ready for it. The end of this chapter was approaching, and I needed to make sure I finished it on my own terms. A week passed after that unsettling phone call with my friend, and I began to feel an eerie calm settling into my life. The restraining order had put a barrier between Kelly and me, and I focused on enjoying my new life without the constant threat of her presence. I spent time redecorating my mansion, inviting friends over for dinner, and really just rediscovering who I was outside of the relationship I once had. But just when I thought I could breathe easy, the calm shattered. One evening, after a long day at work, I returned home to find my front door ajar. My heart raced as I stepped inside, anxiety gripping me tightly. I called out, but there was only silence. My instincts kicked in and I grabbed my phone, ready to dial for help if needed. As I crept through the house, my senses heightened. I noticed something amiss in my living room. Furniture was slightly moved and a picture frame lay shattered on the floor. It felt as if a wave of dread washed over me. Someone had been here. I stepped cautiously, heading towards the kitchen where I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. There, on the kitchen counter, sat a familiar object, my favorite bottle of whiskey. I turned to find Kelly standing in the doorway, a wild look in her eyes. The anger surged within me, but I tried to keep my composure. "Jake, we need to talk," she demanded, her voice frantic. "Get out," I replied, my voice steady but firm. "You have no right to be here. You know the restraining order is in place." "Restraining order? That's just a piece of paper. You can't erase me from your life that easily," she shouted, stepping closer. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. "You think barging into my home is going to change anything? You need help, Kelly. This isn't how to win me back." She laughed bitterly. "Win you back? I'm not trying to win you back, Jake. I'm here to show you how much you've hurt me. You think I'll just let you go without a fight?" I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. "This isn't a fight you want. You need to leave or I will call the police." That seemed to trigger something in her, and she closed the distance between us, tears streaming down her face. "I don't want to be like this. I made mistakes, but I can change. I can be the woman you want." "Stop, you're not listening to me. I've moved on. This is not about you anymore. It's about me reclaiming my life." That seemed to snap something inside her. She flung her arms in frustration. "You'll regret this, I'll make sure of it. You've hurt me, Jake, and I won't let you forget that." I didn't want to give in to her threats, but I felt a chill creep down my spine. This was the moment I had dreaded. I realized that the emotional turmoil had morphed into something far more dangerous. "Kelly, this is your last warning," I said, trying to stand my ground. "I will call the police if you don't leave right now." She paused, her expression shifting between fury and despair, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of the woman I used to love. But it quickly faded as she turned and stormed out of my kitchen, slamming the front door behind her with a force that rattled the walls. I stood there, my heart racing, grappling with the rush of emotions swirling inside me. It felt like I had just survived a storm, and I knew that the time had come to end this once and for all. I knew I had to take action to protect my peace, and I wasn't going to let fear dictate my life anymore. I called the police, recounting everything that had happened, and they assured me they would patrol the area. I felt a sense of empowerment surge through me as I took control of the situation. This was my life, and I refused to let anyone, especially Kelly, take it away from me again. The next day, I took a deep breath and decided to face the aftermath of our confrontation. I reached out to a therapist who specialized in helping individuals recover from emotional abuse and betrayal. I realized that while I had physically moved on, I needed to address the emotional scars that still haunted me. As I started therapy, I began to unpack my feelings, the hurt, anger, and sadness. I learned valuable tools for setting boundaries, recognizing manipulative behavior, and ultimately forgiving myself for allowing my past to cloud my judgment. It was a long journey, but I finally felt like I was healing. Weeks turned into months, and though I still had moments where thoughts of Kelly would creep into my mind, I focused on building my new life. I met new people, explored new interests, and filled my home with positivity and laughter. I began to create a life that was truly my own. Eventually, I found myself at a place of acceptance. I learned that I could cherish the good memories of my past while also acknowledging the pain. I understood that I was stronger than I had ever realized and that I deserved to be happy. In the end, I learned the importance of self-love and the power of moving on from toxicity. I realized that life would always throw challenges my way, but it was how I responded that made all the difference. I had weathered the storm, emerged on the other side, and I was finally ready to embrace the future, one filled with hope, strength, and the promise of new beginnings. As I sat on my patio one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I couldn't help but smile. I had survived the chaos, and I was finally free. I looked forward to whatever came next, knowing that I was equipped to handle it all.